And I want to start by just defining some really basic terms. So would one of you just take the slow pitch of what does psychedelic mean? What actually is a psychedelic?
For the legislation that we ran, and Daniel can fill us in, it was psilocybin. The main ingredient of mushrooms is what we were looking at for the legislation in the last session. Something we could do research based off of hallucinogenic that we've seen from Hopkins University doing their research and other universities, which you are very aware of. So for us, it was that one chemical compound inside mushrooms.
And there are lots of different kinds of psychedelics, as you probably know. So the way in which they set aside differences around psychedelics is actually whether or not it has an additional value other than pharmaceutical. So when you include set and setting into the mixture over the time of the processing of the drug, it has something that we would consider to be psychedelic or hallucinogenic. The next question they're asking specifically is about psilocybin. So how did you first become aware of this, and why did you get interested in it?
Great question. So before the bill, I had no idea what psilocybin was. And last year, I had another bill about kratom. And so I had no idea what that was either. But a constituent reached out to me and said, Arizona, Georgia, these other states are passing the Kratom Consumer Protection Act. And so I did some research, and it seemed like a very logical policy idea. So I ran the bill. Shockingly, no one asked me a single question on the House floor. And then Logan came up to me afterward and said, all right, next year we got to do psilocybin. I was like, well, what's that? And so talked to a few friends back in Lawton, and I was like, yeah, this could potentially be one of my bills for the next session. They're like, you got to do it. I was like, really? But I found out that Texas had passed a very similar bill in the scope that we were trying to do just last year, authorizing clinical research into psilocybin. I thought, if Texas can do it, then, we got a chance as well here in Oklahoma. So I did a lot more research and looking at how it has potential to treat mental health, PTSD, depression, anxiety. I felt it was a very good idea, especially as we move on from the pandemic. We've seen the toll it's had on our mental health. And I think anything we can do as policymakers, we should absolutely consider, even if it means thinking outside the box. And so we filed the bill. As you might imagine, got a lot of attention, including from the Lost Ogle, among other news sources. But we were able to convince enough of our colleagues that this is worth taking on. And it passed the House. It got stalled in the Senate. I think we have more work to do in educating our colleagues over there on the value of this type of research. But if you haven't, I encourage you to read or watch How to Change Your Mind. It's on Netflix. Michael Pollan's the author. A great documentary series on not just psilocybin, but other psychedelics as well, including MDMA, LSD, and mescaline. But I learned a lot through watching that documentary series. I think, compared to the 1960s, we're in a different place as a society. Back then, you had the war on drugs beginning and all these other sorts of things. But I think we're now more open as a society to these types of research. Like, if they can help people, I really think we can make a difference.
So Daniel's being soft on what happened last year. So most people have this misunderstanding that congressmen, representatives, senators are high-bred, gold spoon, high-educated individuals. The reality, 99% of them are hillbillies that just like cows. There's not a lot going on past their narrow view. So here's this 25-year-old Asian, the youngest man there at the state capitol, and I'm sitting around some of the furthest right Republicans in the state capitol, all surrounding me. He gets up and says, we're going to outlaw putting any regulations on kratom.
Can you explain what that is for those people?
Kratom is an Asian psychedelic. I'll let him get into it.
Fibromyalgia, other chronic pain, yeah.
It's a drug. Oklahoma Republicans do not pass drug laws. Flat out does not happen. So he gets up and goes, this is kratom. We're going to make it so you can't regulate it. And all the Republicans looked at him and said, oh, I like Daniel, and voted yes on it. Not a single question, not a debate, nothing. And so I'm sitting over there, and I look at my desk mate, and I look at him. I was like, Randy, do you know what you just voted on? He went, nope, I like Daniel, so I voted yes. So I went to Daniel, and I was like, I've been playing with this since I got up here and didn't think it could happen. I really like psilocybin. And of course, we used the scientific name for it. I grew up in West Tulsa on the cow fields. I'm also a hillbilly that likes cows, and a magic thing grows in those cow fields. So let's try to get psilocybin passed. And so we put it under his name. We ran it this year, and it flew through the Capitol. People jumped on board left and right, especially once we paired it with the veteran suicide rates and the PTSD treatment. And so Daniel was able to move the Republicans of the state of Oklahoma in a direction that they had never gone before, simply because they enjoyed him. So this thing has legs underneath it. We should have been able to get psilocybin legalized this year only because his face was on it. And I think we'll get it over the next year. Now, for my own history with it, I did serve in the U.S. Army for 6 years. Most of my buddies died overseas, or the majority of them came home and killed themselves here. Suicide and the veteran community is through the roof. In fact, Oklahoma is #1 in veteran suicide rates for the entire nation. Now, I myself suffered from horrible depression, PTSD after my service, and I was going to kill myself. I was ready for it to be done. I was 22 years old, had gotten out, didn't know what the hell I was going to do, and went to my buddy who's, we were out drinking. I had taken drinking as a medication for myself. I liked whiskey and just stayed drunk all the time to deal with it that way. And he's like, hey, I got a bunch of mushrooms. You want to do those? I was like, fuck yeah, let's go for it. What's going to hurt? I did a tremendous amount of mushrooms, and it was fantastic. I woke up the next day, and my suicidal tendencies were gone. I didn't have the desire to kill myself anymore. And so I started reading. Being an academic, someone that likes research and data and basing things of my life on where it can point, I didn't know what had caused it, but I knew that that one instance had changed the entire outlook of where I was at in that day. And so I started talking to my other veteran buddies, and they started taking psilocybin and doing mushrooms together. And all of a sudden, their suicide tendencies were going away. And so we saved a lot of my friends by, we weren't microdosing, we were using mushrooms. But it saved a lot of my colleagues' lives utilizing those. And so when I came to the Capitol, I knew there was value to it. And with us and the statistics we have at the state Capitol and the state of Oklahoma being so dismal, I wanted to try to pass it. But there was no way for Republicans to pass mushrooms. So with his background and the things he had worked on, and with my background with veterans, we paired those two together and said, we're going to allow research for psilocybin for the treatment of veterans during an election year. Because the one thing Republicans can't vote against is saving the life of a veteran. Sailed through the Capitol, like just flew through the Capitol left and right, and people were jumping on board that really had never thought of it before. We talked about hyperbaric chambers for treatment of brain injuries and TBIs, and they had started opening their minds to different avenues, but magically, the magic mushrooms seems to be the answer that they're willing to get behind, to the point where even Texans, the old governor of Texas, jumped on board and said, I'll put my name on it. Veteran communities came up to the Capitol and said, we'll put our names on it. People showed up in uniform and said, this is helping us right now. I was going to kill myself, I'm not, and it's directly linked to this. So it just reinforced for the Capitol that this was something that could benefit Oklahomans and that we should pursue it.
Wow. Can we just, how about a vulnerable, open, and honest representative of the state of Oklahoma? How about that? I mean, I've never had a conversation with a representative that sounded like that in a public space with a microphone. I'm just saying. Beautiful.
I don't care.
I'm so glad. But I do want to launch off of his story and actually see, I'm curious about what those stories are that you're hearing. So now that this bill's out there and it's gotten some publicity, I'm sure that people are telling you their stories, right? So can you lift up some of those stories of your constituents that you're hearing, and both pro and con, actually? I think either one, just so we can get a flavor of the folks in Oklahoma.
So I'll never forget, right after we passed the bill out of committee, a gentleman came up to us. He'd been there, he'd heard about the bill, being on the agenda, and he told us his story, very similar to Logan's, that a year ago he was on the verge of committing suicide, but it wasn't until his doctor told him about psilocybin that it changed the direction of his life. And he thanked us for working on the bill, and that had a very significant impact on me. I'll never forget, because I think it shows that, we have a lot of statistics thrown at us about various policy issues, but at the end of the day, it's about the people we impact with the bills we pass. I think that was a good reminder of that. As far as maybe some people are more skeptical, and there are quite a few out there. It's important to have those conversations and try to persuade them that this is not going to be like marijuana or some other drug. Like, this has a lot of potential to help everyday folks who are struggling right now. And I think we made a lot of headway, and the fact that we had so many veterans reaching out, writing letters of support, we still get emails too from people all over the state saying like, hey, where's the bill at? How can we help? And that's been very humbling to know that there are a lot of people out there who support our efforts and that we're not alone in this. So I'm ready to get to work next year and try to get this bill across the finish line.
The cross-section of people that are advocating for this bill and this research to happen was a little bit surprising. Like, I knew in my communities, being the veteran communities, those types would come out. And a lot of us are hard-headed alcoholics that like to do things that skirt the government. That's a veteran community. So I was expecting those. What I didn't expect was the amount of physicians that came out, researchers that came out, religious officials that came out, pastors, preachers, all of those came out in support. Doctors, people that have based their entire life said, I have been scared to talk about this. You could be the advocate. We will give you the research, and we can push this through in an actual meaningful way, not just. And everyone loves marijuana. We're the number one producer of marijuana in the nation right now and have more dispensaries than McDonald's and churches combined. It solves everything from gout to headaches. But when we started talking about psilocybin, the biggest fear was, oh, this is that 1960s thing. We're talking our psychedelics. Like, no, we're talking research. We're talking actual treatment that's verifiable, that we have the data and the statistics and the knowledge behind. The only thing we're missing is a window to open it up to the wider audience. And so when we started presenting that to our colleagues at the Capitol, they're like, okay, one of our colleagues said, give me the research. I was like, okay. I went to Johns Hopkins, I pulled the research, went to other universities and said, here's the actual physical numbers, that this treats PTSD, this treats Alzheimer's and dementia, this treats alcoholism. Like, these are things that it can rewire the brain for. And those hardcore holdovers were like, okay, my father has dementia. My uncle was an alcoholic. My sister has problems with PTSD. And we could start tying that to their individual families and lifestyles and get them on board. And so the treatment that was able to be backed up gave us a direct inroads to each of the people that maybe were on the cusp or thinking it was just another drug that we're having to deal with.
Yeah, and I got to see a lot of that initial research that's been done in the past 8 years as part of the program that I was trained in. And the set and setting are very controlled, right? And they're building relationship with the people who are the guides and the people who are sitting with them. There's a lot of really incredible research that says that it increases people's empathy as well. There's a whole lot of other details that we have, even besides the one that is going to sell this bill, that demonstrate that psilocybin is also about increasing empathy and increasing people's capacity to interconnect. So like connection back to the planet, like, oh, wow, maybe we shouldn't kill it. Connection to one another. Oh, wow, maybe we shouldn't kill each other. So increasing that kind of interconnectedness is also something that comes from that as a bonus. It's like a bonus plan that comes along with that research that we've seen. I wonder what other kind of misconceptions that you have heard, since you kind of went into some of those. Do you want to talk about some of those other misconceptions?
Yeah, I mean, the big one, it was just that this would be another gateway drug, and we're going to have, in addition to marijuana dispensaries, mushroom dispensaries pop up. And like we were talking before earlier, this panel, I think there was, growing up in the 1950s, 1960s, a lot of stigma associated with psychedelics and with drugs in general. You had the war on drugs beginning with Richard Nixon and onward. But I think the times are starting to change with our respective generations, and that we're more open-minded to this kind of stuff. And like, we're not proposing full legalization at this stage. All we're asking for is just try to do some clinical research, get some objective data. I think as policymakers, it's good to have data on the books and try to inform our decision-making process. And so that's kind of the case we're trying to make. I do want to give a shout out to both Chris Moe and Lawrence Pasternak, as well as Ronnie Kell. This was not just us. We had a whole team in place to help draft the bill, help to advocate for it at the Capitol. I know Chris was there many days, morning and afternoons, and even evenings, trying to get the bill.
If you don't know Chris Moe, you probably know him by his other name, Uncle Grumpy.
I was just going to ask, actually, so is the bill, because I'm not sure if anyone here has read it. I know I have not read it yet. So is it specifically about microdosing research, or is it limiting it to microdosing, or is it about psilocybin research?
It's about psilocybin research. So the bill itself specifically opens up our research universities to partner with growers, manufacturers of psilocybin to do open-ended research into its effects and how it will help in the treatment of, and we listed what, 9 or 12 different things like mental health, PTSD, Alzheimer's, alcoholism, those things that we knew would be a definitive answer. Now, we did that specifically because no one in that state capitol will ever open up something completely. They want guidelines and guardrails on any legislation that passes, because with like the passage of, what was the marijuana recreation?
788.
788. We went into the Wild West of marijuana, and we had dispensaries pop up. We've had a horrible influx of black market stuff with negative impacts to like our rural communities. If we would have had some guardrails on that, we would have shown that recreational marijuana probably could have been passed by now. We would have shown it was a good market, that had a good economic impact and those type of things. But because it was open-ended, we had too many negatives associated with it. So we limited the scope specifically to those mental health issues that we knew others had started dabbling research in. That way we could take that with the research the following couple of years and say, we now know definitively this is an answer. So we need to open it up and figure out what that looks like as a market inside the hospital systems, or how we address this on a bigger scale. So it was a beta test before you give everyone a little taste before they moved on.
And so you're not limiting the amount that they decide. They are regulating that themselves. And then does the bill say anything about guidelines with regards to how they manage that? Like whether or not it's protocols or educating future practitioners or meeting the needs of diverse patient populations, those kinds of things. Is there anything like that in the bill?
Well, I mean, we try to give more flexibility to the professionals who are conducting the studies, and then it does indicate that after a period of 3 years, there is a comprehensive report given to the legislature, to the governor's office, so we can have a follow-up conversation about the research projects.
Are there any guidelines research-wise about gender identity or any other kind of identity that we'd like to see to demonstrate that it's a diverse population that they're doing research with?
We put no restrictions on population. So that would be up to the university on how they wanted to handle that. It goes back to that statement that most of them are hillbillies that like cows. You don't want the hillbilly that likes cows making dictations on what the research looks like. So we try to put as limited as we could and still get it passed.
And we did hear from a number of universities, including both major flagship universities, that they were interested in this type of research. And so it wasn't like we were just going to pass the bill and nothing was going to happen. Like there was potential there, and still is potential there for universities to get involved.
So and this may take us in a little bit of a slant of a direction, but this is a question that is uppermost for me because I'm constantly in the education field, very interested in how that plays out in our diverse communities. What we know about psychedelics is that there's a pharmacological benefit, but there's also non-pharmacological factors that shape a psychedelic experience, right? For example, the impact of that set and setting I talked about earlier, and the need to control those factors to support the client. And there's a lot of research coming out now about the importance of actually race and identities of the researcher, the client, and the guide, if there is one, and how those factors actually can impact the client in their most vulnerable state. And so I'm just wondering if you're aware or read anything about that research. There's some great stuff coming out of University of Delaware right now, but looking at the impact of set and setting, and how does this bill make room for that in light of state funding to do this research and the climate of House Bill 1775?
Okay. You stay away from this one.
Sorry,
All right.
That's a lot.
That's a lot, and sort of like you said with representatives and microphones. So I'm going to let Daniel set on this one, and I will take it. All right, 1775, for those that don't know, is the bill that limited the scope of education in the elementary, secondary, and post-secondary realms. You can't teach things like one race is greater than the other, or that you should feel negative about the history based on your race. It's like a paragraph and a half long bill. The negative impact of this bill and how it's being interpreted by people like Ryan Walters, because he's a moron, is bad for the state of Oklahoma. So the way our bill was written has nothing to do with that because it predated 1775. 1775 came after this, and we had no impact. If you read 1775 by itself, the premise is that no race is greater than another race. That alone, there is no harm there. That is a decent thing, that someone shouldn't feel guilty or be made to feel guilty for the race. You should be able to still teach it in the histories and the full intent and the full spectrum of it, but you can't punitively damage one kid over another. I think most of us would agree on that. Now, for the gender identity and the sex part of both the guides and the doctors and whatnot, that really goes back into, we left it very open-ended, specifically for the researchers to figure out what they wanted. The only thing we really limited it on was treating those things that were the mental pieces, the PTSD, alcoholism, those type of things. Whatever the population inside the studies looks like, I'm a college professor, I would leave that up to the board that sets the research.
Perfect, thank you. And I will let him abstain.
Well, the only thing I'll add to that is I was the only Republican to vote against House Bill 1775 because I knew that what's going on right now would happen because the language is so broad in the bill, and we're having issues with Mustang Public Schools, with Tulsa Public Schools, and I'm worried about teachers leaving the profession more so than as it is. And I think when it comes to, as a Republican Party, these social issues are so divisive and polarizing. I wish we get back to more fiscal and pragmatic issues. I think the reason why you have issues like CRT coming up, and by the way, like if you ask the average voter what CRT is, especially ones who are pissed off about it, chances are they have no idea what the heck it is. They just watch it on Fox News and get off of Facebook and whatnot. But that's not who as a policymaker, those types of issues are really trivial. And I think with things like psilocybin, where we can actually have a direct impact on people's lives, so long as I have the opportunity to be a representative, that's what I'm going to focus on.
And I really appreciate you both saying that. And so you're saying that the funding is not going to have anything, it will not be scrutinized under House Bill 1775.
It won't, but it does dictate that there is no state funding to this.
Okay.
That's why if you get state funding, you get state regulations.
Right.
But for a university to go and get grant seeking, which there are grants out there, and there are funders that want this research done,
Outside of Oklahoma.
outside of Oklahoma,
Got it.
then they can put the requirements and the pieces into the bill and the research without Oklahoma having overly exertion of the power. So we dictated that no state funding would pass through it, but they're not limited on where they get their funding.
I see. Beautifully crafted. Good job.
I thought we
A lot
did
of
well.
Good job, good job. But let's turn a little bit, if you don't mind, and I'm not trying to make this conversation about identity, and at the same time, when we are grappling with our mental health, and when we know the state of race relations in the country right now, and also when we are grappling with our own identity inside a construct of a state that may or may not be embracing us, that all shows up in the setting, right, of what it is if we're on a psychedelic journey, right? What you watched on the news last night may show up in your psychedelic journey, right? Which is one of the reasons why some of the best protocols talk about actually abstaining from the news for a week before you even go, and television and input. There's a lot of things that people can think about out in the community, even if they're not in a research study, that would benefit them to continue to have a positive experience with psilocybin, for example. And these protocols can easily be found on the internet if you would like to Google them. But I wanted to just push that a little bit about, and I know you're not in charge of it. So are there ideas or constructs or conversations that you've had about that connected to psilocybin, or is this really the place where we're having this conversation?
Are you asking like as far as identity?
Yeah, the identity connected to the psilocybin and the mental health.
For aspects of the legislation, no. We're not going to have those conversations at the state level because it would kill the bill. Just putting it flat out there. Now, in my own research, like we're Oklahoma. We have 67% of our people in Oklahoma are tribal engaged in some form or another. We have the whole Two-Spirit movement of the tribal nation, and they've been using psilocybin mushrooms, since they began, several 10,000, 20,000 years ago, however old our nations are. So you cannot separate the identity of the person away from the experience. That's to be expected. Just like the veteran community, and we are a protected class, so I'll always bring it back to who I am. When we go on our trips, we are dealt with the PTSD and the trauma experience during our service. You add that layered on with your own history, which most veterans, if you look at the poverty index and the childhood ACE scores of veterans, they are almost all through the roof. So you pair all that together with the PTSD, the ACE scores, the poverty ratings, and the traumatic experiences, you have a very interesting trip that needs to be guided some. Or you can just go take a bunch and see what happens. I wouldn't suggest it. So those conversations are happening. They're just not happening in regards to the bill itself.
Yeah. And I would echo what Logan said, and With my house district, we're a military community. We have Fort Sill to our north. And so we have quite a bit of diversity when it comes to politically, socioeconomically, ethnically speaking. There's a lot of incredible people in the Lawton area. And that helps me inform when it comes to this type of thing, the importance of representation, the importance of making sure everyone's included in the process. So even though that's not the scope of the bill in terms of like governing in general, I think that's absolutely critical. Try to include as many voices as possible.
And just thinking of the bill itself, your two authors here are of a minority class and a protected class. So all of our lived experiences went into the creation and the authorship of the bill itself.
Beautiful. What's the current status of the legislation right now, and what do these folks need to do to help make it happen?
Yeah, so we didn't get the bill passed through the full Senate, and because we're on a 2-year cycle with the legislature, we start over next year in 2023. Before then, Representative John Echols, he's the House Majority Floor Leader, he and I are conducting an interim study on, it's officially titled Reducing Alcohol and Drug Addiction. It's really a kind of a backdoor way to talk about psilocybin. Coincidentally, though, NBC News just a few weeks ago had a great story about how psilocybin can help treat alcoholism. So it was perfect timing for our study. We want these as an opportunity just to get the word out and keep informing our colleagues about psilocybin. But we intend to refile the bill, have the same team together, and now we know who supports it, who's on the fence, who's against it. We have a better playbook for next session.
Fantastic. And anything else you want to say about what folks can do? What should they do?
For advocacy for this type of legislation, you need to be engaged. We don't have a very strong Democrat presence at the state capitol, but you have a very strong Republican that can be swayed. I tell most of my constituents, it usually takes 5 phone calls from people inside my district. If 5 people from inside my district have contacted me, that means it is an extremely high priority piece of legislation. That means they've taken time outside their day. That means if I don't vote for it, they're going to take time outside their day again. And so I need to get on board. If you call, that's the most important. Email's the weakest link. If you show up and speak to them in person, that's the strongest form of advocacy. If it does not pass through the state legislation body this next year, I expect us to be pushing for a people-led state question. That means we overtake the legislative body and say, you could do your job. We're going to do it ourselves. And so if it comes to that, we will need volunteers, we'll need workers, we'll need people to collect signatures. And so you need to stay engaged starting in February to try to get the legislation passed. And if that doesn't happen, you need to re-engage come next summer so we can do it a different way.
And are you going to be part of that if it ends up going to the state question?
Yes.
Yeah. So you can call him or at least email. Fantastic. Is there anything else that you haven't been asked that you think would be helpful to share with this audience before we kind of shift to a Q&A?
Just appreciate you guys coming out, and I think it's important to stay engaged on these types of issues. And I had no idea that when it comes to psilocybin, there was broad support nationally. So that's been awesome to see. But it's been a real pleasure working with Logan on this. I consider him a good friend. I'm glad we got elected together in 2018. Had no idea we'd be working on magic mushrooms. That's probably my time in the legislature, but that's life. So
I'm open to any questions you have.
I'm not usually somebody who enjoys polarities. I like to kind of go outside of either or, whether or not it's a Democrat, Republican, whatever. But I will say that you two have changed my entire opinion of the Republican Party in Oklahoma today, like radically changed it. Fantastic. So do we have questions that you all, and I'll just repeat them. If you want to say them loud, I'll repeat them. Yep.
Like passing this bill, could you speak more about how the relationship with mushroom growers will develop in this?
So each university will be in charge of finding their own supplier, basically. Yeah. Now, there will be requirements of, it's not going to be to the extent of medical marijuana and the dispensaries and the seed to sell and all that, because that infrastructure simply isn't in place. So the university will find someone that is supplying for them and then have to report that to the state. But that's pretty much the guidelines right now.
That means they can actually find someone in Oklahoma who could be that supplier. They don't have to rely on the John Hopkins version of the psilocybin.
That's correct.
Fantastic. Yes.
Preface, I just want to say I was a student of yours for a couple of years, so it's a little bit of a weird experience talking to you like this.
small world.
Hopefully you passed my class.
Okay, so we're good. I had a question. So hippies, and they're saying you're funding the liberal
He's got
So-
yeah.
I am in the state of Oklahoma considered the lying liberal professor. My last opponent, dropped $160,000 of his own money against me, and dark money spent $400,000 against me, and I lost 84% of my district. So I actually lost my last election. They thought I was going to go away by beating me in that manner, and they still barely beat me. It took $500,000 to get me out of office, and if you think I'm straightforward and open and speaking now, I was the exact same way when I was in office, and I pissed people off all the time. Even with all their dark money, I was sitting in Tulsa, tired of it, eating my dinner with my wife. I turned behind me, and they're running an ad on ESPN with my face. Of course, is where I was wearing my adult braces because they loved those. They had modified my arm and put an old man arm with lots of hair on it and added a bump to my neck and called me the Hollywood elite, that I was sending money to Hollywood and trying to get them to come here. My response to all of them every time that they sent their 47 mailers against me and spent their $500,000 was to tell them go fuck themselves. I'm going to keep doing whatever I want to do. And I lost my election. I will be back on the ballot in a year and a half, and we'll see if they can beat me again without the $500,000 behind them and with an even louder and bigger voice and hopefully more supporters that are better suited to me.
You know, there's one thing that I've always believed, in that Oklahomans do have that kind of a spirit of neighborly, but at the same time, fuck off will often come out if you are messed with, right? That really is true. There's something that unites us in that way of like, I'm going to fight for my right, for your right to be able to do what you want to do.
I fully believe in leaving me alone.
Exactly. Other questions from the audience? Yeah.
Why do you feel like it is stigmatized? Like using marijuana is kind of like a litmus test. Whenever I go to dispensaries, I see such a wide range of people, like from the political spectrum. Do you think that's similar with psychedelics as well? And if so, like, could it not just see that same pathway?
Yeah, I think it's generationally. That's the thing. People who watch Reefer Madness or grew up in the Nixon, Reagan era, and don't do drugs and all that kind of stuff. But I think among young people, the sentiment's changed and it's different. And with medical marijuana, it's a little bit more nuanced because I think a lot of folks knew someone who had a terminal illness and who used marijuana, who saw the potential using marijuana. And so I think that's a big reason why that state question passed. And even among Republicans, even they had to acknowledge, like, oh, I mean, when it comes to end-of-life care, like this can have a major impact on them.
Everyone hates hippies. That's what it is. I really think it is a stigma with the older generation. I'm still hearing people complain that these damn millennials are getting of age and ruining everything, not realizing that millennials are me and I'm 40. I'm the main workforce at this point in time. So the older generation definitely has a stigmata against it from the 1960s, where we had the government forced attack on the hippie culture. The Vietnam era hippie culture, that was a direct attack organized to go against that one particular group that was anti-war. And that's carried over for a long period of time, I think.
Just blowing my mind right now. But it's all about your identity. It has nothing to do with what you're saying. Keep going.
And then with the marijuana, it's really interesting because we have, 1 million something licensee holders in Oklahoma, population of 4 million. And out of those licensees, we know that about 2 people use each license. Your grandma, who's 84, is probably taking a gummy to go to bed. So it really got rid of a lot of that negativity surrounding it when grandma was, finally eating on her cancer patient pills. The problem with marijuana wasn't so much that the use of marijuana anymore. It was the unregulated economy of it. And we went down a black hole of a very negative piece. You're not seeing it so much here in Tulsa or Oklahoma City, but in the rural communities, we have every major crime organization in the world came to Oklahoma. We have people being, in my own district, we had a group busted. They were dragging a guy by his ankles through the streets. And that was an illegal marijuana farm that popped up overnight, threatened a bunch of people, grew their weed in 8 weeks, and then abandoned it all and then flew out the coop. Tremendous amount of it's going to other places. So the stigma now is that's what they're seeing. Not so much the I'm gonna smoke some weed, I'm gonna vape, I'm gonna take a pill or chewy or whatever. It's why is there 17 hoop houses right next to my farm that's cross-pollinating my farm? Why are they leaving these things that are now growing into my fields? Why is there armed guards that I can't drive down my dirt road anymore? And so if we can get the market under control, you'll see the medical marijuana industry boom in Oklahoma. I really believe that if you switch to a recreational format, we would actually see the black market dry up here, and a lot of the rural communities become very adopting of it. Because when you can make $40,000 an acre growing hemp, most of my wheat farmers would gladly jump ship to that. Way better than corn. But for the psilocybin, LSD, any of the hallucinogenics, it really just rolls back into that government propaganda from the 1960s. But the good thing is, it's been 30 years since anyone's talked about it. And so all the people that were really worried about it from the 1960s, they're dead. They've gone on, or they've aged to the point where they are taking recreational marijuana, and now they've taken that introductory step, so let's try some of the next piece. And so I think the culture's shifting, both with the millennials coming of the major voting bloc. I hate to say it, but the passing of the boomer generation into that retirement time frame. And the younger generations, the Gen Ys and whatever the youngest one is, Gen Z, they don't care at all. The number one fastest growing voting bloc in Oklahoma is independents. For registrations, so the Republicans are going down, the Democrats are going down, and then independents' thought process is, leave me alone.
Absolutely. I want to answer that question too, only because I sit in a different position. So people come to me and reveal their psychedelic use one-on-one in a private setting. So I will say that version of a dispensary, which in my lifetime, I mean, I never thought would happen in my lifetime to be able to walk into a dispensary and see a teacher, a person down the street, somebody that I knew in my neighborhood. It's like, oh, here we all are. Don't talk about it, right? And at the same time, I will say that even over time, that's gotten more and more diverse in the dispensaries that I've been going to. It's like the age gap is all over the place. Race, all types of different racial identities, gender identities are using marijuana medically, right? Well, in my conversation, so I was trained in something called internal family systems, and most of the work that I do one-on-one in pastoral counseling is actually that model. That model is the standard model to do psychedelic integration as well. So I use it just to help support people to integrate their parts, but I also help when you've had a psychedelic experience and you have not actually integrated those things. We can help to make that happen, right? And really what's happening in a psychedelic trip is that your internal parts are being projected like a screen onto your external environment. And so when you can greet those things, meet them where they are, process through them, you actually benefit yourself and integrate what's going on internally for you as well. So that to be said, I'm meeting with a lot of people doing internal family systems who don't come to me at first and say, oh, I've done psychedelics. But within the first session, they can do it very easily. And I will often at the end say, it seems like it's a lot easier for people to access this idea of the process and the model if they've done a psychedelic. Oh yeah, I did the number of people who've done psychedelics who reveal that to me is probably 80 to 90%. And my clients vary in age, in economic status, and gender identity, and sexual orientation, racially as well. So I would say that it's more and more being talked about than I've ever seen. And some of that has to do with what we're seeing, I think, nationally, right? So it started with Denver being legalized, and then we saw Ann Arbor, Michigan, and Seattle, and Oakland, right? So we're not the only place. So you also can have people talk about their legal usage of psilocybin now in a way that they might have not felt they could have before, because they can say they were in Denver or Ann Arbor or Seattle or wherever. Yeah.
Now, Grant, I know that you can't use this with children because of the impact with getting the words like with the amygdala, like you know what I'm trying to say.
Yes.
But where do you see that this happening in like 20, 30 years with abuse and the way people are processing their own trauma and maybe not passing that along? It's not so much generational trauma when it comes to alcoholism, abuse, suicidal tendencies, and like things of that nature.
So like the future of the usage, is that what you're asking?
Like how it impacts like, the way that we're able to assess kids in schools.
Oh, kids.
Like it has an indirect direct relationship with like not them using it, but their parents and the people.
Oh, I see. Just articulating the benefit to families, I think is what we're, yeah.
Well, for child use, that's just off the table. It's not going to happen in Oklahoma. Just to make that clear, I know that's not what your question was. For the generational trauma, like we know that it's encoded a lot in the DNA, the ACE scores, the poverty rating, all that kind of stuff I talked about before. And so when you're dealing with, as our good doctor here is talking about, going in and killing your ego with psilocybin or other hallucinogenics, it can really remove a lot of that self-induced harm that you then pass through to the next generation. Again, I was a horrible sufferer of PTSD and depression. If I would have had children and stayed with that, I would have been a very angry, very abusive soldier or ex-soldier veteran. Because of this, I was able to break the cycle, and I tell people it's like a light switch. It turns off a lot of that self-harm that you want to do. And if you start feeling and understanding yourself, of course, you're less inclined to, with that increase of empathy, to do harm or ill will either accidentally, unintentionally, or intentionally to the next generation. So it can break those generational problems by self-healing, but it takes guidance, it takes research, and it takes someone willing to do it to make that happen. So I think over the next 30 years, we're going to see this turn into a actual methodology and medicine that's used in psychotherapy, that's used in the hospital systems, that is acceptable, that replaces a lot of our prescription style drugs. With that, you'll see the dependence issues go down, you'll see the harm go down, you'll see those traumatic experiences go down with each generation that takes it.
When you say like that, though, won't there be a pushback with pharmaceutical, with something that is?
Oh, they're already trying to patent it.
Think recreational marijuana or marijuana in general. You start off with dispensaries that where it'll pop up in every little store. What do you have now? Dr. Z's, that gigantic, the cookie store, whatever, that's all through Oklahoma City. I think it just says cookie and it's a giant box. Mega stores. And so as this becomes acceptable, the big boys will start to play. And once they realize that there's value in it, then they'll all of a sudden become advocates. Marlboro has a marijuana cigarette they patented since 1960.
Yeah, and I think if there's a way to make money off of it, they will. One of the things that a lot of people are pushing against right now, because we're seeing so many things, people are looking at where the money is going to be made off of this, right? And so one of the places was trying to patent, there's a single side chain, and y'all interrupt, I might be wrong about how I label this, but when you're looking at the chemical compound, you can actually take the mirror of the chemical compound and get something very similar. Not exactly, but very similar. So what's happened is we have pharmaceutical companies who have actually taken psilocin and psilocybin, and they've found the mirror of that exact thing, and they're trying to patent that as their own thing, right? So that they can market it, market studies, put things behind it, and then issue it in a pill with a prescription. Oh, yeah. It's happening right now. In the psychedelic community right now, people are really pushing against that, right? And with the mushroom community, I will tell you, if you're very interested in this and how it's going to impact, just think, well, you could think corn. That would be the worst case scenario. You can think weed if you'd like. But the reality is that whatever happens with mushroom growers, what we do know is right now we have tourism. Right? We have tourism of places where you can go and it's really easy to go get mushrooms. Now, fortunately, we have some places to do that in the United States now. But what it did do is damage a lot of native land in Mexico, in South America, where we've had a lot of folks from the United States go there in order to experience certain psychedelics. And they have just completely radically changed the ecosystem in those spaces. So if you are interested in helping to get ahead of that right now, do some research in that. Who's doing and driving that work? It's not hard to find. If you just put up psychedelics psychedelics and indigenous people, you will find a bunch of different websites of people who've graduated from classes like mine who are really trying to get ahead of the game and try and create some legislation before it's a free-for-all.
I think there's a question in the back. At the municipal level, not that I'm aware of, no.
This organization of state statute laws here in Oklahoma, a municipality would be punished directly if they tried to legalize something like this for the municipality. Especially with current administrations that are in, You've seen this on the education side, not for psilocybin, but 1775 is a good example. TPS having their accreditation dropped. If a municipality was to try to go against state statute and legalize this, you would see the current administration find something to punish them with. So I would seriously doubt we have anything like that happen. There is a caveat to that, though. Oklahoma is half Native American tribes, and we had the McGirt ruling that Native American tribes and tribal land are tribal land, not state of Oklahoma land. So if, say, the MCN or the Cherokee decided that they wanted to open up a growery, dispensary, or do the research in it based on their own tribal nations, I think they would have a feasible lawsuit to do that, and the state of Oklahoma couldn't stop them.
Given current legislation.
Given current Supreme Court rulings.
Supreme Court rulings, yes. Other questions that you have for, yeah.
So I know Johns Hopkins, but how many places around the country right now actually have a research lab?
As far as like legislation or like other universities looking into this?
States research.
Texas for one. Yeah, there were about a dozen, I think, that were considering the legislation like we were this past session. Now, how far they got, I'm not sure. But we were the only ones who were considering this type of bill. There were others around there, and other Republican states. So I think we got probably one of the furthest in terms of progress this past session.
It feels like I remember about 7 states had something on the books. But for the universities, they're doing the research, even not under states. There's a lot of universities doing underground research that aren't aptly sharing it out or promoting it in a lot of ways.
Other questions? Go right ahead.
I like hearing you talk about your experience, right? That seems like that's the best way to get people to change their minds. So is there a way that we can get in front of like people that are stubborn about it? Maybe they could have we could bring in a lot of people that have experiences like yours and get people to look at it like, oh, I didn't expect that person to say that. So
You want to be a contact point and start organizing them? First Monday of February to the last Friday of May is when state legislative body is in session. If you want to help, we can organize a day and bring as many up as you want. And we can go knock on some doors at the state capitol and ask to speak to all of them.
In the meantime, we're also trying to organize professionally with different professional levels. So like one of the things I'm hoping to do in the next year is a talk with clergy, to give clergy an opportunity to talk about the thing that concerns them, which is whether or not they're meeting God when they're under psilocybin, and if that actually counts as that or not. Some of them get a little wrapped up in that. So having that conversation about what does it mean to have a sacred experience that might have been supported by a psilocybin experience, and how do I help them integrate folks better, right? And where can they have some resources so that they're not basically taking what could be the most powerful experience that someone's ever had and tell them that it's not legitimate.
Moses was next to a smoking, burning bush, right?
Don't get me started on communion. I got a book for you. Other questions? Yeah.
I guess I got a question. So, are you guys taking lessons from how you talked about the medical marijuana industry, guardrails set on it, taking the lessons you learned from that, and hopefully going to apply them in the future to if we get to a point where recreational mushroom use can be applied, like take those lessons to be able to put like guidelines on like how you can grow mushrooms, where you can grow them, who can grow them, things of that nature.
Oh, for sure. And Chris Moe, he was a big part of 788 back in the day, so he learned a lot from that experience. And before we got to this bill, he actually had strong pushback from that community because they want to go directly to a ballot initiative state question. But he was like, well, guys, let's work with the legislature. Let's go through the process. Let's put a system in place that we can take incremental steps. So we could potentially get to that point you mentioned in the long run. So I mean, that's absolutely something we've considered and will continue to consider. And I think that's what informed our, as far as how we designed the bill. Yeah.
I was just thinking, we all are also a state that loves our beef. And it seems like connecting with cow farmers in the United States, I mean, in Oklahoma would be the right thing to do, right? To connect directly with them, get them excited about it.
Everyone hates hippies, and a bunch of farmers don't want them on their cow patties.
They could make money off of it. If they could control it and make money off of it on their own property.
I think you would be very surprised at the number of high-level officials that have already had experiences with this. So there's definitely a way to market this so that it becomes passable. And the way to market this as an advocacy side is the spiritual side is interesting as long as you can do the right spiritual side. It is a Christian Republican state. So the reality is market through that side. The veteran community, no one votes against veterans. So if you frame it around the treatment of PTSD, you can't vote against a veteran. The servicing of treatment for alcoholism, drug abuse, that is something most Republicans can't vote against either, because we are huge on the scale of abuse in the nation. So you find the right thing that you can market to the audience that has to pass it, and give them infographics, statistics, pieces that match up with the people that vote for them, and you can get it passed. If I'm a Republican and I can wave a sign that says I saved 45 veterans in my community, that's an easy answer, yes. But so you got to be careful in how you phrase it, and even if you're passionate about this, you have to damper that passion down a little bit and come at it based on data, statistics, and research.
And just to make sure, as I'm going on my journey, your bill covers cancer as well as that, so end of life issues. So one of the key sections that is very important with this work is that psilocybin has been used in a number of trials through my mentor, actually Bill Richards, who's done this work at Johns Hopkins, with working with patients who are at end of life stages, and they have them do their life review using psilocybin as a support. And it is a beautiful, beautiful program. The research is just very exciting to see how people have been able to process, integrate their lives in a way that has reduced pain, and at the same time that creates an entire family systems dynamic that allows that person to go in a way that they would never have been able to do if they had not had that support. So it's a really beautiful thing that a lot of chaplains are getting excited about, and because we are chaplains at hospices, walking with families, doing these things. And so there's a whole group of chaplains who are hoping to be able to educate other clergy about this issue, and hopefully they'll educate their constituency. Other questions?
I want to thank you guys so much for this conversation. This is actually the last panel of Spark Summit 2022, and just couldn't ask for a more thoughtful and forward-thinking conversation, and appreciate the courage of you representatives for putting this forward and really doing meaningful work. And Tamara, it's clear that you're the perfect person to have had facilitate this conversation. So just want to give everybody a round of applause.
Thank you, guys.
Thank you guys for having us.